Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. Please join us over at rivianstories.com for all the latest Rivian news. Maybe pick up yourself a t-shirt while you're there. Thanks. All right, guys, going into the next topic, which I did mention in our last recording a week ago. We said we'd get to this, and this one's interesting to me. And Skylar, thanks for helping me out with some references here. The first article I have pulled up on the screen from Jalopnik, driving 100 miles is in an EV is now more expensive than in an internal combustion engine in an ICE vehicle. So this caught my eye because, you know, I've driven a lot of miles now and kind of seeing my electric bill go up. And I'm like, And I'll be honest, like it's been probably more expensive than I thought, especially with like fast charging for sure. So kind of went through some of this. And then this is the one that I had brought up last one to show as far as where you're getting your electricity in different parts of the nation and how that would translate into driving 100 miles. But this is under the assumption of driving at 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is going to be different than Rivian for sure. And so, Skylar, you were talking about how you've done some numbers on this. We've seen some of the numbers around Rivian Stories and other Rivian communities. Can you just kind of take it away and give us some clarity on what's going on here? Who's right? Who's wrong?
Well, I feel strongly that in most cases, it is much more cost effective to drive an EV than an ICE vehicle. And I think the proper baseline that you need to set first and foremost is like for like vehicles. So compare a like EV to a like ICE, if that makes sense. And specific to Rivian, the way that I think about it is a Rivian is going to be closest to, let's just call it a 20 mile per gallon truck or SUV. And when you look at it that way, you break down the cost of home charging, the cost of fast charging versus what it would cost in gasoline to fuel a 20 mile per gallon truck or SUV. So for me here in Texas, my electricity rates are around 12 cents per kilowatt hour. And the Rivian's efficiency over the lifetime is, or mine is, right around 2 miles per kilowatt hour. So that gives me a price per mile of about 6 cents. And I know that some people are going to bring up, well, what about the cost of your EVSE? And I would address that in kind of two ways. Number one, I did get the Rivian wall box, but I consider that to be almost a cost of the vehicle because it is optional. You could use the mobile charger that is provided with the vehicle, and granted, maybe charge a little bit slower, but I would not include the cost of the EVSE. So then you look at, okay, so on a road trip, what does it cost to charge? And Electrify America just announced, and I don't believe it's implemented yet, but a 5 cents per kilowatt hour increase to their prices. And the way that I think about that, so right now it's 31 cents per kilowatt hour if you're a member. And anybody out there that's going to use Electrify America fast charging, even on a single road trip, it makes sense to do the $4 a month membership. So that puts your cost per kilowatt hour at a little over 15 cents, right? 15, 16 cents, which oddly enough, with our $3 a gallon gas prices here in Texas, is right at the cost per mile of an ICE. So for me, a road trip in my EV costs as much as an ICE vehicle for road trips, for fast charging. However, when charging at home, the fuel cost of an equivalent 20 mile per gallon ICE is 2.5 times my cost of charging at home.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sorry, that
Yeah,
was a mess.
No,
No, that was actually really good.
it was good.
I mean, I followed the whole way. That was awesome.
For us in Florida, just and I won't even use Jacksonville. I just use the average kilowatt, or the average cost per kilowatt hour is 16 cents. So we'd be slightly more expensive than you. And my average, I'm looking at $8 for 100 miles in the truck. And our average fuel cost right now for the entire state is $3.39 per kilowatt hour. So
Per
we
gallon.
actually come out ahead.
$3.39 per gallon.
Correct. Yes. So did I say per kilowatt?
Yes.
339 per gallon. Excuse me. Yeah. So we'd be slightly ahead of you there with our higher fuel cost in driving the truck versus driving an equivalent EV or equivalent gasoline vehicle. Excuse me.
So that's good, Jimmy. Thanks for bringing that around because you kind of extrapolated the number all the way to the 100 miles. So for most people listening this, when you say 6 cents per mile, most people are like, okay, how does that translate? Where are we at? And so if we did 6 cents times 100 miles, obviously you're at $6, right?
Correct.
Per 100 miles.
Yeah.
And Jimmy was at 8. And
right.
So
yeah. So ice here at $3 a gallon would be $15 per 100 miles. And I'm going to do Jimmy's 339. So that would be $16.95 with Florida gas prices per 100 miles.
Mm-hmm. And the other variable to throw into this is if you're actually going to get 2 miles per kilowatt hour as far as average efficiency, which I am not getting right now in Illinois when I drive on the highway at 75 miles an hour when it's 35 degrees out with even a 10-mile-an-hour wind. I just don't get it. I'm more like 1.7 or something like that. So that's going to cut into it a little bit. And so my suspensions. And so my suspicions of looking at my electric bill and saying like, oh man, it's not like I'm saving hundreds or thousands of dollars a month is pretty true. I mean, it's going to be cheaper, but it's not. It's still the biggest win for driving EV is how fun they are to drive, how capable they are to drive, and then let's not also leave out though that we're only talking about fuel equivalencies here. When you start throwing into the equation the cost of maintenance and upkeep and all that, that's where EVs have a considerable advantage over ICE.
I'll just add one more to that list, Kyle, and it's convenience. It's being able to charge at home and leave every morning with, a full or near full tank, right? That to me has been the biggest change and honestly one of the things that I love the most about owning an EV outside of the performance and capability, of course.
Yeah, you can almost not put a price on the convenience. And I have, that's one of the biggest things that I tell people is the fact, like you just said, Skylar, waking up, or you know what, like last minute trip, hey, let's go somewhere, and grabbing my phone off the nightstand and adjusting my charge percentage from 70 to 100, waking up, and now I went from 190 something miles to 270 because I still don't have the update yet. And we can go down to Orlando, or we could go up to Savannah, Georgia, and not have to stop at all. Just essentially just get out of town.
And
I didn't have to make any stops other than grab coffee.
Yeah. One of the other best things is apparently vehicle chargers are easier to work than a gas pump because my wife has not run my Rivian down to 0 yet.
So I was actually just going to say the opposite, Skylar. I was like, the only bad part of convenience is getting your wife to plug in after she uses it. And when you go out to check on the Rivian to tuck it in for night time and it's not plugged in, I'm like, so yeah, you do have to make sure that the better halves are aware to plug it in.
Kyle, the funniest thing
Yeah.
about that is that you tuck your Rivian in at night.
Yep.
Good. Love it. Love it.
Got to. Yeah, so that was helpful for sure. Thanks for looking up into those numbers. And I think it'll be helpful to everyone else too, as far as just the cost of gas versus electricity. The other thing that we did not mention into this is if, of course, you're buying your electricity from the grid. We haven't talked about solar, and I realize it's a huge upfront cost. And there's other programs now to where it's not a huge upfront cost. But if you talk about having the capability to charge from the sun, now you're really in great shape as far as saving fuel money. What do you guys think about that?
It would be sweet, but it won't be this house. As much as I would love to do it, this is not a forever home. And even if I'm gonna do the monthly, like a monthly payment plan, like you're talking about, because there are a ton of programs out there where basically you just substitute your electric bill with a solar bill now. That'll be sweet. It just won't be this house.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to vary greatly by region as well with regards to what you have to pay for electricity, because with the rates as low in Texas as they are, there's not really a financial justification for going solar. So it has to be something that you do because you want. And the other thing is most EVs are charged at night. So unless the net metering or utility buyback rate structure is good, then, it could be detrimental in some places.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And like speaking for us here in Duval County in particular, like JEA as a private utility, we get charged, I think it's like 13 and change per kilowatt hour right now. They do have a program, and I've mentioned this before a while back, but they do pay us $7 per month per vehicle if we charge between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Monday through Friday. And then we can charge anytime on Saturday and Sunday, but they'll pay us $7 per vehicle, paid out quarterly. But the interesting part too about this whole solar, and the reason why I probably won't do solar in this house, is because in Jacksonville, and again with JEA in Duval County, they only give you 3 cents per kilowatt hour back if you send it back to them. And for me, if I do solar, not only would I pay the monthly payment on solar, but I'm going to have to, in my case, in my thought process, it's more advantageous to me to keep everything I'm generating. Therefore, now I'm going to have to buy batteries, whether it's a Tesla Powerwall, because it just makes more sense for me from a dollar perspective to keep all the power, because they're only going to give me 3 cents for every kilowatt I send back to them. Versus some utilities like that will pay you, like FPL, for instance, right down the street. If you get outside of Duval County, we get an FPL, and they are charging 14 cents per kilowatt hour, and they'll give you 14 cents per kilowatt hour. So that makes sense to not have batteries in that instance.
Right. And more places, unfortunately, are moving away from that. But on the flip side, I get it. If they buy power from a power company, they buy it at wholesale prices. Whereas if they're buying it back from you, should they pay customer retail, they wouldn't have to pay that if they bought it elsewhere. So I understand both sides, but I do feel like that's a trend that we're going to continue to see, is true net metering falling to the wayside to the advantage of the utility providers, because they want to pay you the same rates that they would pay if they bought that energy elsewhere.
So that's a good segue into the next topic, but we're not going to get to the next topic until the next recording, because we already have 2 edits out of this. But that next topic, speaking of grids and buying from and putting into the grid, there's this question of, will EVs crash the grid? So I would like to talk about that sometime, but I'm just going to leave it as a cliffhanger for now. Say that we'll get to that one next one. So Skylar, Jimmy, you guys do your research. You figure out if EVs are going to crash the grid.
It's
And
done.
we'll talk about it next time.
I've already done it.
You already have your answers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, that's all for this one. We have more coming, so please subscribe. In the meantime, we hang out at rivianstories.com. Click on shop, find yourself a t-shirt. Thanks so much for your support.